Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Own Your Image, the Own Your Image series. I'm Deshante, and we're super excited to have you here today. And we also have a very special guest, Pastor Wayne Chayne. Pastor, welcome to the show, and we'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's a long time coming. I'm just love what you do, the work that I've seen online. You're doing an amazing job. I'm Wayne Cheney. I'm a pastor, Antioch Church in the city of Long Beach, and have been there for about 17 years or so. I have a wife, Maisha Cheney, three kids, Wayne, Rain, Reign, and Cadence, who are the loves of my life. And, also love, as you know, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit today, just taking the restraints off, moving beyond what we do in ministry or church into entrepreneurship, business, civic engagement, all those things. So, really excited to be with you. I love when I meet individuals who are people of faith, but also realize their mandate is much broader than what happens in the context of the spiritual family or church, but people who are really making inroads using the creativity God's given them to inspire the world. And so I always love these conversations.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we do too. We really think it's important to really have these conversations and really teach that owning your images from the inside out and speak
Yeah,
to different sectors and different people. So we'll go ahead and hop right in today. We'll just
sure.
start with the very first question is what does the word faith mean to you?
It's so many things, and when we think of the word faith, it's really the context it is used in. But I think what you're getting at as it relates to faith is, really the display demonstration of faith, or what faith feels like. How would you describe it as it's embodied by us, right? As you know, I'm a pastor, and so a good starting place for me is a description of faith. But it actually takes faith to even understand the description of faith. Bible has this unusual definition. It says the faith is the substance uh, of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, which is crazy. It takes faith to even understand that, right?
Right.
Because you have in that both concrete and abstract, ambiguous, which gives you a sense of kind of what faith feels like, the felt experience. So, substance, concrete, of things hoped for, ambiguous, evidence, concrete, of things not seen. So faith is a combination of really holding on to and having, to a certain degree, evidence of what there is no empirically measured science for in many respects. And so, um, you know, it's a spiritual principle that really, a possession that really starts on the inside and influences every area of our life. A real simple way of putting it is faith is, people push back against this some circles, but faith is belief, but a unique kind of belief. It's not just a general belief, but it's a belief that governs your life. It's a belief that prompts us or inspires us to take often very practical actions in response to that belief. And so, best way of putting it in a nutshell is, I've heard it said that faith is like, or belief is like being on a sinking ship, right? And from that sinking ship, you can see lifeboats going from that sinking ship to the shore, to land on the shore. Belief is knowing that the lifeboat can take you from the sinking ship to the shore.
Mhm.
But faith goes the extra mile, in that faith is a belief that prompts you into stepping off of the sinking ship onto the lifeboat that will take you to the shore. And so there's this sense of activation in faith. It's not just a belief I carry, but it's a belief that helps prompt me in response to what I believe or have become convinced of. And so it's why it makes sense. The Bible says faith without works is dead faith. It's not real faith, but real faith always has a corresponding action or response to it. So it's a belief that is so deep seated that it moves into some sort of corresponding action. It's kind of how I see faith.
Woo! Okay, you said a whole word, Pastor Chayne. The way you broke that down, even from the beginning, just saying that it takes faith to actually understand faith
Right.
and coming with a boat. I love that. You just broke it all the way down. And I love that you said faith is a belief. We're interviewing different people from different sectors, and some
Yeah.
are believers of in God, and some are not. And so just saying that faith is a belief. If you are having a belief in the ability, like you said, believing that you can step off the boat, that's a belief system.
Yeah.
I really, really love that. How does faith, I know you said you dive into entrepreneurship and building outside of ministry. How does your faith carry over into your entrepreneurial life and in the
Yeah.
business things you pursue?
Yeah. I think even before getting there, right, faith is important in that faith is audacious
Mhm.
in that it's often, set just beyond the realm of possibility for us. Faith, faith is active because faith is sort of God giving us a sense of the possibilities in seed form. Doesn't matter that it happened and all those things, but often God gives us a seed of divine possibilities. And whenever we have an inspired idea, concept, a sense of what we can do or what God wants to do through us, it comes in seed form, often in the form of an inspired idea. And you know it's God when that inspired idea is just a little bit more or a lot more than you could pull off yourself. Faith in entrepreneurship, it stretches us because again, God gives us a sense of possibility in seed form, but the vision is often bigger than we're able to pull off ourselves. And the question becomes, when we get a vision that requires more money than we have, right? And let me just say something to the entrepreneurs. I don't care what phase of entrepreneurship you're in, ministry, business, um, that is something that never ends. God always requires some sort of faith. Um, if you have nothing, but you have a vision to start to launch a business, that takes faith. But what I found is many assume that once you get $10 million in the bank, then that faith is done. But what I find is when you get $10 million in the bank, God will put in seed form another vision that is a $30 million vision. And so, whatever level you're in, there's always the requirement of faith because God will stretch us beyond our own capacity. So even to get into these um, inspired visions of our life, to carry these visions for businesses, ministries, and creative concepts out, it requires faith because again, if it's from God, usually it's beyond what we're able to pull off ourselves. That's the first part of it. The other side of it is um, even along the journey, um, entrepreneurship for so many is challenging, it's exciting, but it's also a scary place. And there's not just a faith that inspires us to go higher and further than we thought possible, but there's a grounding faith. Um, so our faith also, our relationship with God, for me, is what anchors as well in those times of uncertainty when it looks like it's not going to work, when your back is up against the wall, when you were blowing up and everyone was celebrating that. That's great. That was a side of faith that reached beyond your own capacity. But what do you do when you're no longer on the mountain, but that entrepreneurial journey takes you to the valley
Woo!
where you're not celebrated, where you've lost money, where it looks like the business is going to fall apart, where you've had to mourn your dream or your expectation, what you expected, what your reality doesn't match your expectation. And you got to sit in that for a while as your character is being built. The other side of faith that we don't talk about enough is not just, hey, with God, I can do bigger and better things, but even when I fail and when my expectations aren't met and when my bills aren't paid, there's a sustaining force. There is a sense that my identity is not attached to all of these external things, but my identity is attached to the God that gave me the vision in the first place, and the one that can make it all new or exceed my expectation again sometime in the future. And so that side of faith is significant for an entrepreneur too.
Yeah.
Knowing that, again, or believing that you can go beyond what you thought possible, but also being sustained and okay when things don't work out the way you expected them to work out. So faith meets you in both mountains and
Mhm.
the valleys of life. And so for me, I don't know how I would have been able to do ministry and have the businesses I had over the years and deal with pronounced disappointment without something bigger than my aspiration, bigger than my finance, bigger than my vision to hold me intact.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What I heard you say at the end is that you needed to be rooted. You need to
Yeah.
be rooted in your faith is what I'm really taking from that. And so just to go back a little, you are very full of wisdom and you're a pastor and minister. How can we go back a little bit to before you had this level of faith? How did you kind of get there?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It sounds unrelated, right? But I think many of us, we don't give this part of our story, but we're developed in adversity.
Mhm.
Um, I grew up in a household where understanding, I mean, there were pastors in my family literally all the way back to slavery. Um, my mother was extremely spiritual, devout. I had good examples, um, great influences, spiritual influences my entire life. But I think the question you're asking is, when did it really crystallize? When did it become personal for me? And I think there's so much we know and understand cognitively, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. So often there's a disconnect between what we grasp cognitively and in our true experiential encounter with faith or with God. And for me, that chasm closed. Those two things came together through pronounced brokenness. Um, I went through several things toward the early part of college, just personal tragedy, brokenness. When you're ever in a place where you're broken and you're met with tragedy or adversity, you're forced to really grapple with what matters.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you find people whose parent just died, or who got a cancer diagnosis, or who've experienced being put out of their home. Right? There's very few people you find at that moment who say, I got to find where the party's at. Listen, it's about this money. I mean, in those moments, you're forced. I mean, what really matters crystallizes. And for me, like most people who experience that sort of transformation, again, I wasn't concerned. I mean, that took all of the trivial stuff. I mean, it just wiped the slate clean, and it caused me to really process through what matters most. Now, my assumption was I was going to go. I was in school. I was, headed toward law school. I was going to go. My plan was to go to law school, make my money in corporate law, and then give God what was left by about 65. I mean, that was my plan. But through, I think, brokenness and through personal crisis at the time, when I woke up in the morning, it wasn't a bigger paycheck. It wasn't any of those things that drove me. The only thing that got me up out of bed every day was this unique communion, a simple word for just relationship, speaking with, hearing from, connecting, longing for God. It was unexpected, but that is what fed me. It's what sustained me. It's what helped me through crisis. And again, what I didn't know at the time, being so young, is that for many people who have um, um, a story of pronounced transformation in the middle of their own plans for their life, there's usually some sort of brokenness that brings them to a place of reckoning where they have to ask themselves the question, what really matters in this life? And that was the beginning of it, for me. But even with that, I wrestled for a long time with whether this was really what I was going to give my life to. I mean, I was speaking in churches and wouldn't let people call it preaching. I said, hey, listen, this is a talk. Don't call this preaching. I'm not a minister. I'm just Wayne. It took me about 10 years before I was even comfortable with that. So it took me a while of wrestling through it, but I eventually got there.
Oh man, I can, that last part, I can definitely feel that.
Mhm.
Not wanting to call it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Right.
love that. So I think audience, I hope you're taking notes because there is a ton of wisdom being given from Pastor Wayne today. I love that you explained that it's the journey. And I think it goes back to, like you said, you find faith. You also have faith in the valleys of your
Yes.
life, and it really helps to level you up and grow your faith. And that's where you have that encounter where you need faith. That's all you have when you.
Yes. 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 And that really, um, we see that as, we don't see that often as blessing, right? The struggle, the valley, the difficulty. And I think this is important for entrepreneurs and people that have done what you've done, gone out and, stepped out on faith to begin businesses. We just, I don't know if we see that as blessing, but really, what are we without those valleys? Those are the things that prepare us. Those are the things that fortify us. Those are the things that cause us to throw our head up and put our shoulders back when the next challenge comes our way, because we're familiar with battle, we're familiar with challenge, we're familiar with struggle, we're familiar with difficulty. Most people um, cannot stand, their pain threshold is not great enough to break through to the next level of success, because they're constantly nursing themselves in an attempt to avoid conflict, to avoid difficulty, to avoid discomfort, to avoid disappointment. And you'll never get to where you ultimately want to be avoiding those things. This is why often God takes us on a road. Our trajectory is rarely like this. It's often mountains, valleys, mountains, valleys. We go progressively higher with a series of, again, disappointments, and because all of those things help to shape us. They help to a certain degree desensitize us to all the things we're fearful of, fearful of failure. Well, listen, I've done that 5 times, so I'm not, I'm going to step out on this dream. Fearful of pain, fearful of lack, not having all you need. But God will take us on this journey of mountains and valleys, often to fortify us for where we're going. It's what thickens our skins, what toughens us up, is what prepares us for greater opportunities. There are so many people whose gift took them to a platitude that their character couldn't sustain,
Woo.
simply because their journey was too quick.
Yeah.
There were no valleys. There was nothing that created a robust inner person to be able to handle the level of, you see it all the time.
Yeah.
You have people that are celebrated, but for a season, because they don't have that fortitude, or other individuals who squander, this new success they came into, because they don't know what it is to have that tempering that comes, that seasoning that comes with the valleys. And so, I think they're necessary, and you get to a good place when you realize that your valleys even are blessings,
Yeah.
and your valleys are preparation for where God's ultimately taking you.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. I love that you call the valleys blessing. So we don't see it because it's painful, y'all, but those valleys, like Pastor Wayne is saying, is a true blessing. It's something that's coming to form you from the inside. And so it's super important that you recognize it's a blessing and you can get through it, and you got to get through it in order to basically walk into your purpose and align yourself with where you need to be in life. And so, and like you said, you don't want to not go through it and then get to a platform and you can't handle that platform because you ain't went through it.
Right.
So, so good. Thank you, Pastor Wayne. We're going to switch it up a little bit and we're going to talk about self-care. So I
Mhm.
love this conversation. We have a couple of men coming on, and so men don't typically discuss self care a lot. So I love that we're able to ask you, what does self care mean to you?
That is so rich, and that's a big word in my household.
Mm,
Self care is so important in this day and age of drivenness and grind and hustle and go get it and ballers and girl bosses, and again, I'm cool with all of it, but I think that we have this heel taking mandate without permission to bleed. And quite honestly, if we do have permission to bleed, no real permission to nurse the wounds.
mm,
Um, and if we don't really nurse the wounds and figure out how to live well, so many of us are, goal driven and goal oriented. And by the time we meet one, there is another one. And we're not really doing a good job of taking inventory,
yeah,
only inventory of our rest, but inventory of our mindset, inventory of the physical health in our body, giving ourselves permission to find some enjoyment in to smell the roses, or as I say, to sip the coffee slow, right? In the midst of all this grinding that's happening around us. And I think really self-care is a commitment to exploring, what it is to live well, not just to achieve, right? But to really live well. It's a commitment to unapologetically prioritizing yourself from time to time. While what I do is sacrificial, and I constantly have others in sight as relates to how my life affects them, how ministry affects them. Um, I really look outward, but I've learned over the years that I've preserved and been a part of refining people's lives. And while my professional ministry in life was great, personally, there was a toll being taken on me. And so, self care is really permission to prioritize yourself unapologetically, because if that doesn't happen, your mission will be short-lived anyway, whether that is taking years off of your life, or changing the quality of your the gift that you are to the world.
yeah,
That's a serious issue, because we don't give what we know, we give who we are.
yeah,
And you can't fool humans. You can say things, but if you've ever listen to people, there are people that talk about love, but you hear the hate. There's an undercurrent of hate that's coming from them. Or you hear people that talk about peace, but you feel more distressed after listening to them, because we don't give what we know. We give who we are. And
yeah,
so this is really important, that we take time to nurture, to develop ourselves, proper respite. And the spectrum can go, I mean, this can go from working into your routine, guilt free, whatever does it for you. So it's different for different people. Some people like a massage, once a week, once a month, a spa, time at the spa, or to take time guilt free to sit and watch movies, or to binge your favorite show. That external things that rejuvenate you. But the other side of it is just being kind to yourself. I think is self care as well. I
mm,
find that a lot of people, extend grace and forgiveness to so many people who have wronged them. People who make mistakes, they're so gracious and patient with them. I
mm,
find that they're often gracious and patient with people in a way that they're not gracious and patient with themselves.
yeah,
If they make a mistake, they're hard on themselves. If they don't have a perfect presentation or panel or whatever it may be, they demonize themselves for the next 2 weeks. Now, if someone else did that, they would encourage them and tell them, listen, there's another one tomorrow. You did a great job. You know, so being kind to myself as it relates to my self-talk, as it relates to extending myself grace when I make mistakes. So not extending everyone else grace, but then when I make a mistake, demonizing myself or feeling shame. No, self-care is extending to yourself, the same grace often you extend to everyone else, extending to yourself the same love that you extend to everyone else. So there's very practical things like massages and binge watching, but there are internal things like that are self care again, like extending to yourself what you extend to everyone else.
I love that. I love that you brought it there, that we have those external things, but we also, our mindset is self-care as well. And
Yeah, yeah.
we speak to ourselves. That's really important. Do you ever again, I think you kind of touched on this, but about not feeling guilty, but do you feel guilty when you do take time off for ministry, or how do you handle that? Because it can be like you say, you have a lot of people, you have a family, you're married, you have the kids, and balancing that all. Do you feel guilty when you get in the call, like, can you do this, can you do that, and you're like, oh, I can't do nothing right now, I need to take a moment?
Yeah, yeah. I think I've grown in the ability. If you ask me now, I would say, I live pretty guilt free.
Okay.
I love what my wife says. One of her professors in her spiritual formation program says, you know, try not to live with as many shoulds. Um, shoulds. I found that it's just not very helpful. Um, they often produce guilt for what we're not doing or what we're not enough of. And while we set goals and want to be more productive, I love what this guy said. He says, "Stop shooting all over yourself."
Mm,
I think for me, I've released really the guilt surrounding what it takes and whatever it takes to refresh me and to make me more effective for what I do. And people that feel guilty for several reasons, but many of them don't make the connection between them um, taking the time that they need to
yeah.
refresh themselves and effective um, progress in their discipline. And it was difficult until I made that connection. I'm not effective. I'm not creative. Um, I'm not inspiring if I'm not taking that time.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful not to allow people who don't require what we require to be effective to impose their idea of what we should and shouldn't be doing on us
Yeah,
either,
that's good.
right?
Yeah.
And I've had to learn that there's some people that, um, you know, they reset by activity through activity.
Mhm.
Um, you know, through doing, so the people that reset through, for instance, doing chores around the house.
Yeah.
That's where they rejuvenate, reflect. That's where they think to clean their environment, to engage in activity. It resets them to do a mundane task that does not require heavy cognitive processing, right? That's what resets them. But then there's some people that doesn't reset them, that add to the frustration. So what resets them is, again, binge watching their favorite show.
Yeah.
But what you have with the person who resets by cleaning and the person that resets by binge watching their favorite show are two different things. And often the person who binge watches will criticize the person who's cleaning, like, you just can't sit down. You need to sit down somewhere and rest. And no, that's refueling them. But the person that's, walking around, being reset by activity, brainless activity, it comes across as productive, like they're just grinding. But no, that's what actually resets them. But they cast judgment on the person that's sitting there binge watching. I find that we've got to give ourselves permission to reset the way we reset, because I suspect, particularly in many of our sort of circles, culturally, Black circles,
Mhm.
um, I don't know that we give ourselves permission. I don't know if we quantify all of the stresses that we experience in life because we've lived under so much.
Yeah.
We wake up to, I mean, we are accustomed to, if not pronounced discrimination, racism, microaggression. We become so used to it that it's a part of getting up and going through the day.
Yep.
There's almost an expectation that somewhere we're going to deal with that. So much so that it's not even on the radar anymore. But that's a stress, right?
Mhm.
That's a weight. That's a load. And
Mm.
because we've been taught to push through it or to just employ our faith, or, we don't give ourselves permission to do things that other people do in other communities,
Yeah.
like lament, like to sit with grief. No, we got to get back up and make it happen. It's like, no, but we all experience that in different ways. And so I think we've got to give ourselves permission to do whatever that rhythm is. When I was younger, I allowed other people's rhythms to be imposed on me. But what I would do if I could go back 15 years, 10 years, would be to spend more time finding out what resets me. And I don't care what it is. If it's going to watch three movies back to back, or getting in a car and driving up the coast, or saying I'm done for the day. I know this is a work day, but I'm going to go to reset at the beach.
Yeah.
um, and I'm make this very practical, right?
Mhm.
Because this sounds like just a guy who's lived out here, and has got his own rules of engagement and is too, free to move the ball forward. But if you study, um, I was up in the Bay Area speaking for a friend of mine in San Jose, brilliant leader, amazing church, and he has quite a few people from Silicon Valley,
Mhm.
in his church,
Yeah.
innovators, Google, Facebook, tech companies, quite a few techies up in that area. And so I asked him, we had some free time after I finished the conference. I said, can we just go and show me some of these headquarters, some of these places? And he has, again, a lot of top tier leaders who are members of his church. And so he drives me around and we begin to talk through, as we went to these different headquarters, the philosophy that they have there. It's amazing, how they speak about innovation in their work environments.
Mm.
They have gyms and row machines and basketball courts and soccer fields there. And I said, what are these people doing? This is a work day, right? And he said, you can explain to me the philosophy. They're bottom line oriented, they're goal oriented, and they have to meet they manage their projects and they have to meet certain goals, but they don't disparage them for stepping away from the desk and going to play with their team or cohort a round of soccer or 3-on-3, or to go work on the rowing machine. That's work. They
Yeah.
said they're not paying them for their labor, they're paying them for their ingenuity, their creativity, they're paying them for their brain. And what they found is in those activities is where most of the innovation in those eureka moments begin to happen. So they have this balance of work and labor, but also play. But as they're playing, like all of us, their mind's not turned off. As they're playing, their project's still in the back of their mind. And they said it's in those moments
Mhm.
that these breakthrough, these revolutionary ideas come. Now, all of us don't have the luxury of, moving into that side of innovation. But for those of us who do, entrepreneurs who do, you can't feel guilty about those moments of stepping away from it all, whatever it looks like, to um, do the things that refuel you, to do the things that spark your creativity, to do the things that continue to keep you innovative. If I could go back 10 years, I would have employed this much sooner,
Wow.
much sooner.
Wow. Wow, you said a lot there. And I want to point out the one thing that really stood out to me. You said that we each have our own way of resetting. And while, when you explained the person might be doing this and one person might be watching TV and one might be moving. I think that's so important. And I'm like, man, I be judging people when they just be sitting there, whatever, playing video games, but that may be their way to reset. So I think that's super important for the audience
Now, I
too.
will say, I will say, that now there's still, now if you talk about like our employees and, whether it's the businesses or whether it's in the church, I'm cool with that, right?
Yes.
But you'll know a tree by the fruit that it bears. So after all that video game playing and lounging,
Yeah.
if you can produce, that's the key, right? That's the key. If you can produce. If you're not producing, then you just zoning out. You're playing video games. So we'll give you a little time to reset. But listen, if there's no productivity, if there's no innovation, if there's no creativity, if there's nothing that's moving the needle forward, after a while, yeah, bro, you're playing video games. Listen, we need to get back to work.
Yeah, I love it. But I think then that takes you to the story of the going in Silicon Valley and understanding the work and play. I think that's a
Combination, yes. Yeah,
combination.
yeah, you're right. So if it's yeah, judging people that reset that way, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And you'd be surprised how many people actually game. I thought it was a thing for kids. Man, listen, there are CEOs that are closet gamers.
yeah, yeah. It's an interesting world. So,
Right, right.
just to move forward, and we're wrapping up on time. We talked about faith. We talked a little bit about self care. You've given the audience a ton of nuggets. Um, I want to ask you just really quickly, how do you, and you talked about this a little bit, but how do you manage your time as far as like, what are your practical, do you keep a schedule, managing your time with being a minister, a pastor, a husband, and a father? What are some practical ways that you do it?
Yeah. So for me, um, there are people that do this much better than I do. So I am an INFJ. um I think it's was one of the rarest personality types,
Mhm.
right? And that F in there is feeling. um and my feeling is really close to my thinking, but I'm more of a feeler. And so often, as it relates to big projects, naturally, I have to be inspired to continue at the same pace with the same passion, right? What I've had to learn is how to function outside of natural inspiration, which I think is really important for a lot of entrepreneurs and creatives, is to find ways to function and things that hold you accountable, even when you don't feel inspired. Because inspiration, you will not feel inspired. I don't care how much you love what you do, you will not feel inspired 90% of the time. You probably won't even feel inspired 50% of the time. If you're inspired 50 or 60% of the time, you're doing pretty good. You're gonna do all right, right? So for those of us who are not, I mean, how do we manage that side of it when we're not naturally inspired? And I think that comes with, for me, accountability. And another thing with entrepreneurs is, you don't have anyone cracking the whip.
Yeah,
If you're in a slump, that bottom line will be affected eventually. And so we've got to find a way to manage that, because many are creative and many are wired for inspiration. And so I think it's important to create routine in your life. Now, what works for me is, I often, I want to gather people when I want to gather my team around inspiration. So if I get inspiration at 1 a.m. in the morning, 1 in the morning, I don't even wait until the next morning. I'm calling you guys up. I want to at least give it to them in seed form. We're going to talk about this first thing tomorrow. Or
yeah,
my guys, my creative team, they couldn't stand me for a while, because I'll have a message sitting on it for a week. And then I remember one morning out this message for a door that I wanted on stage, because I was talking about the threshold. And I said, I need a door for this. That'll make it so much more compelling, right?
yeah.
Well, so the first service started at 7:30 and it was 5 a.m. I called my creative director. I said, can you make this happen? And he literally went down to Home Depot and built a door that was there. I mean, it was a little rickety. He didn't have much time, but I drove them crazy. And so, that's a challenge. But what I found is helpful is creating a routine within the rhythm of the week. I don't do good with a hardcore militant schedule, like a extreme type A. I
Uh,
do better with taking days of the week that I can prepare myself for. I know on, for instance, Tuesday, that's where I want to give myself to staff. I want to process through church things. I want to, I can prepare my mind to deal with any challenges there are, to wrap my mind around, to put my church hat on, right? So setting things on different days of the week are really helpful for me, because I know what to expect, and everything kind of stays in that category to the best of my ability, right? Outside of, the sky falling, which sky falls once a week in my line of work, right? But with that said, Tuesdays would be, staff meeting days. And so I'm present, I'm there.
yeah,
Any questions they have, anything I need to process through with them, they know they have all of me, versus me running from one meeting to another, putting on different hats because of the role I'm playing and being engaged in civic activity or business stuff and rushing them because my mind is somewhere else. So it's better for me to focus a day at a time. So Tuesday would be church, staff, ministry related things, and you have me all day. And then again, you can reorganize these however you choose, but then you set for a Wednesday for either special projects or things I need to do as relates to writing deadlines, writing, when I was writing my book or writing, I'm working on my dissertation, now for this year. So, setting a writing schedule, and doing most of my writing or study, deep study, on that day. If there are any, we have a counseling team with therapists, licensed clinicians for counseling. But there's still things that people are looking for, pastoral insight on. And so, setting my meetings, those sorts of things on another day, which helps. So I'm not again all over the place, sporadic. I have a touch of ADD too, so it helps for me to categorize those things so that my mind is not bouncing, all over the place. But then I work into every week, and I, again, with family, we've worked into the rhythm of our work, bringing family along, as opposed to creating the separation between work and family, ministry and family, business and family. So my son, I have a fragrance line I'm launching this year. I've been working on it for 7 years in the south of France. I started 7 years ago with this fragrance line. So as opposed to me just going into the lab and working through this business, my son has an entrepreneurial bent. He's a business mind. He's 14 years old. And so from father son time, I brought him in on this project. I said, hey, I want you to be my partner in this. And so bringing them along the journey is extremely helpful, but also exclusive time. As opposed to a bunch of family time collectively, I found that the goal is when I can take them as individually with me. Different sides of the personality emerge. The bond is much stronger and much better when I'm able, to do that. And so, again, that's what I do. We have a rhythm of bringing them on the journey, as well as, one-on-one time, scheduled throughout the week to ensure that there's some connection being made, with them. And then finally, time for just what we talked about, respite. I think worked into the rhythm. Not there's the balance is an illusion. You'll never have balance in this life.
Right, right. That's yes.
It's a rhythm.
Yeah.
So work into the rhythm of every week. There's at least one day a week that is the Sabbath, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, I'm not hardcore, it doesn't have to be, Saturday. I'm saying is, but every day in the week, there's a day set aside where I'm not being extremely productive, or at least that day we talked about where I can sip the coffee slow,
Yeah.
where I can, go down to the beach, where I do give myself permission to go to the mall and to Jamba Juice into my favorite restaurants when there's no crowd there, because that's half the stress of people's life, right?
Yes.
So one day a week where everybody else is at work, I'm going to take time. So you keep the weekend. I don't care about the weekend. Listen, one day during the week where everybody's at work and I don't have to stand in line, don't have to fight crowds, to reset myself. So work through the rhythm of every week. One day out of that week is going to be a day where I sip the coffee slow. And then every month, there should be a weekend where you give yourself that time. And then every quarter, something, twice a year, maybe some sort of vacation where you get away. We do one with my wife and I, then another one with the entire family to the best of our ability. We can travel every single year. And so I think, rhythm is really important, in this. So that's sort of how I schedule it. I schedule my life in blocks to keep myself sane.
Love that. Love that. That was very practical and some really great tips. I hope you are taking notes. I love that you noted your personality style in that, because we all each function differently in our personalities, and so you gave some great tips for there. One last and final question to wrap it up. How do you hold yourself accountable or keep yourself accountable as in your life?
Yeah, that's, you know what, that is very, very great question. And it depends on what kind of accountability you're talking about, right? So for me, I think that the one thing that checks all the boxes as it relates to accountability is authentic relationship.
Mm,
Um, there are multiple layers of accountability. But I think, the easiest one, I think the most, the most important one is ensuring that you're surrounded by the right people. Um, in your career, right? This is extremely helpful. Research shows that you generally are not too far away as it relates to overall performance and even finance from the five closest people to you. The question you ask is who's in my five, right? Because there's a natural organic accountability that comes with, a relational circle that is either driven or creative or insightful, as opposed to, getting in a lab and trying to be disciplined. When that is, your relational circle, what you'll find is naturally and organically, as you're doing life, you rub off on one another. And so one of the ways to keep yourself really productive and inspired, if you're struggling with that personally, is to build a company of people that you're in authentic relationship with. And by default, the water level will be, risen, or will rise. The same is true, I think, of personal and internal, struggles, challenges, whatever it may be. Sabotaging cycles that we find ourselves in, right? All of us find ourselves in, whether it's, I know I need to do this, but I'm not working out, or I know I need to get up earlier, but I'm staying up late, or, I'm dealing with these things that are damaging to my soul. Like I'm working hard, but I find myself in these bad relationships and going backwards. A good social circle and giving people permission to, quality people that love you, permission to break in on your life, to giving them permission to um, help bring to your attention the blind spots that you don't see. We have to be open to their feedback, right? Is extremely helpful because they can see it often before we see it. And sometimes we see it, but we don't want to do anything about it. We're in denial, or we suppress it, or we avoid it. But having the right people in our life accelerates that level of accountability. It brings it to the forefront. It doesn't allow us to subtly drift into irrelevance or subtly drift into sabotaging cycles. And so for me, get the right friends around you, and it's a way to keep you accountable that is actually comes with joy. It's organic, and it will change the trajectory of your life if you have the right people. Now, there's so many other things I can speak to as relates to accountability, but that's the best one by far for me.
Okay, perfect. That we hear that all the time, y'all. Everyone in the audience, we always hear the top 5 people you surround yourself with are the most
Yep.
important. And so, yes, that is the truth. So,
Yep.
thank you, Pastor Wayne. Thank you so much. We appreciate. Are you still there? Let's see.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, perfect. Oops. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on with us today. We truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and your wisdom and your giving. Can you tell the audience how we can find you, your church, and where we can keep in touch with you?
Thank you so much for having me on. It's amazing. Thanks for the work that you do as well. You're inspiring so many out there. You can follow me on all social media platforms at Wayne Chayne Jr. And our website is Antioch Church, AntiochLB.com. That's AntiochLB.com in the city of Long Beach. And you can stream live there on everything we offer, and look forward to being in touch.
Okay, thank you so much. And guys, we'll see you all at the next show. Bye bye.